archetypal figure. How does this come into making it for a contemporary audience? What are your challenges?
Well, I think, first of all, it's very important that you're all aware about the story of Faust. And so since I grew up in Germany, it's pretty obvious that I got in touch with that very early at school. Because as much as you like to try a play like Faust, which is so terribly long, the only thing to do is when you want to make an opera, you have to cut it. So therefore, many side stories are just not here. And by being aware of that, you can add many more things that are actually not in the libretto, but knowing that you can have another habit, another attitude, another aspect on several scenes, which helps a lot.
I think that's what makes your character so vivid, is that you actually infuse it with all this background information. And
maybe, and I think that's what I always say. I believe that real feelings for this person are equally important, because if you don't fill up your sound with some substance, meaning really emotional
connection.
Connection or energy. It's not worth it. I mean, only beauty is nice, but never touching.
Yeah, and that's what you give us in spades here. Is this role more difficult than others? You have a wide repertoire. How does this fit into it?
Well, it's not an extremely long role. As you may notice here, Gounod has concentrated more on the story of Marguerite than actually on Faust, because imagining that everybody knows the story of Faust, he wanted to have a closer look at what happens to this poor girl, which is true. Therefore, Faust has not so much to do. I mean, it's actually Mephisto who has to sing the most in it, and therefore, the really challenge for me is, you mentioned Sigmund earlier, is to just combine those two things. The very first scene in first act is an old man. That's why it's written much lower than the rest of the opera. And then suddenly you're a young, vivid man in French opera, meaning tons of high notes and tons of diminuendos, as you mentioned.
Amazing.
And that's probably the most difficult part of that.
Okay, so I don't know if you realize this, that in the Met history, there's only been 2 other tenors that have pulled off the feat of singing Sigmund and Faust at the same time. Placido Domingo, who we know, but there's also an ancient tenor named Andreas Dippel, who retired in 1908. How are you sort of straddling these 2 roles, and how do you bring them to life?
Well, again, I think people like Placido, who I admire very much, he probably was wise enough to do the Faust in his youth, and then maybe 15 years later took on parts like Sigmund. Mm-hmm. The real difficulty is to do the 2 things at the same time.
This is what's extraordinary.
But I believe strongly that whenever you're doing a strong and a heavy part, you need to have a counterpoint. You need to have something very light and very delicate, that it's either a lead recital or something like this, where you can actually keep the flexibility in your voice, because that is part of the beauty. And if you don't do that, then all the heavy parts will sound honestly heavy. And
that's why you give us such beauty today. We're just so happy.
Thank you very much. I need to say some words to my fans. Bonsoir tout le monde, buonasera tutto il mondo, buenas tardes todos, and of course, guten Abend, hallo, herzlich willkommen an meine Fans im deutschsprachigen Raum. Vielen, vielen Dank, dass ihr heute wieder dabei seid. Ich freue mich sehr, dass diese wunderbare Institution HD existiert und wir auf diese Weise die fantastischen Produktionen hier an der Met in alle Welt bringen können. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you wonder what I just said there. Don't worry.
I got it. Now I get the privilege of speaking with today's director, Des McAnuff.